beautiful, you certainly know.
Oh, that was so beautiful.
To meet you.
Lillian said, the last thing she said to me was, don't sing after that. Nobody said,
Were you going to hit a high note for us?
no. Wasn't it incredible?
Beautiful.
I don't think it's ever been better done. I mean, absolutely beautiful.
Hollywood's golden age wasn't all glamour and red carpets. Some films nearly brought the entire industry crashing down. From shocking violence and forbidden love to scandals that outraged governments, churches, and audiences worldwide, these movies didn't just push boundaries. They shattered them. Why were certain films banned, censored, or blamed for corrupting society? Today, we're revealing the 20 most controversial films that sparked protests, rewrote the rules, and almost destroyed Hollywood forever. These aren't just movies. They're the stories Hollywood tried to bury. Let's uncover the scandals behind the silver screen. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. When The Birth of a Nation premiered in 1915, it changed cinema forever, but not for the reasons Hollywood hoped. Directed by D.W. Griffith, it was praised as a technical masterpiece, introducing groundbreaking camera techniques and storytelling methods. But beneath the innovation was a deeply disturbing message. The film glorified the Ku Klux Klan and portrayed African Americans in hateful, racist stereotypes. What was meant to be a celebration of film became a national scandal. As critics said at the time, it's art wrapped in poison. The backlash was immediate. Across America, protests erupted outside theaters. Civil rights leaders, including the NAACP, called for the film to be banned. Riots broke out in some cities where the movie was shown, and even President Woodrow Wilson was criticized for allegedly supporting the film, a claim still debated today. Hollywood had never seen such a powerful reaction to a movie before. Despite the outrage, the film was a box office success, proving that controversy could sell. But it also forced Hollywood to face a terrifying truth. Movies could influence real-world hate and violence. Griffith defended his work, saying, "I only told history." But many saw it as dangerous propaganda. This was one of the first moments where Hollywood realized that with great storytelling came great responsibility. In the end, The Birth of a Nation didn't just make film history, it nearly destroyed Hollywood's reputation before it had even begun. The calls for censorship and accountability that followed would echo through the industry for decades. If The Birth of a Nation proved that movies could stir national outrage, Hollywood would soon discover that pushing boundaries didn't always involve politics. Sometimes it was about pure shock. And no film shocked audiences more than a little horror movie in 1932 that left people running from theaters. Let's step into the disturbing world of Freaks. Freaks, 1932. In 1932, director Todd Browning dared to make a film that Hollywood still tries to forget. Freaks wasn't your typical horror story. It featured real-life sideshow performers with physical disabilities. Browning, known for Dracula, wanted to show that true monsters weren't those who looked different, but those who were cruel. But audiences weren't ready. After its release, Freaks was called an abomination and banned in several countries. The film told the story of a beautiful trapeze artist who marries a dwarf for his inheritance, only to face terrifying revenge from the freaks she mocked. While Browning intended sympathy for his cast, viewers were horrified just by seeing people with disabilities on screen. Reports claimed that some audience members fainted or ran out of the theater in shock. MGM quickly pulled the film and heavily edited it, cutting over 30 minutes of footage. The backlash didn't just affect the movie, it destroyed Browning's career. Once a respected director, he was blacklisted from major projects after Freaks. Critics slammed the film as tasteless, and it became one of the earliest examples of Hollywood burying its own creation. For decades, it was nearly impossible to find a full version. Yet, over time, Freaks found a second life. It became a cult classic, praised for its bold message and ahead-of-its-time commentary on acceptance. But in 1932, it was nothing short of a disaster for Hollywood, proof that crossing the line could cost careers and send shockwaves through the industry. While Freaks horrified audiences with its visuals, another film that same year took a different path, scandalizing America through bold dialogue and unapologetic sexuality. It wasn't horror or violence that sparked outrage this time. It was a woman using her power in ways Hollywood had never dared to show. Enter Babyface, the movie that forced Hollywood to put rules in place. Babyface, 1933. In 1933, Babyface hit theaters and almost immediately caused panic among Hollywood's moral guardians. Starring Barbara Stanwyck, the film followed a young woman who used her sexuality to climb from poverty to power, seducing every man who stood in her way. It was bold, unapologetic, and unlike anything audiences had seen before. As one critic put it, she didn't fall from grace, she rose because of it. What made Babyface so controversial wasn't just the suggestive scenes, it was the message. The film didn't punish Stanwyck's character for her choices, breaking the unspoken rule that bad behavior must lead to consequences. Religious groups, women's organizations, and politicians were outraged, accusing Hollywood of promoting immorality. The heat was so intense that Warner Brothers was forced to re-edit the film, adding a last-minute ending where the character repents for her actions. But the damage was done. Babyface became the poster child for what was wrong with Hollywood in the eyes of censors. It directly led to the strict enforcement of the Hays Code, a set of rules designed to control what could and couldn't be shown on screen. For years after, films avoided topics like sex, crime, and independence, all thanks to the storm Babyface created. The original uncut version of Babyface was thought lost until it was rediscovered decades later, shocking modern viewers with how daring Hollywood once was. But back in 1933, this film nearly collapsed the industry's fragile relationship with moral America. As Babyface proved, Hollywood's golden era was constantly walking a tightrope between art and outrage. And while seduction caused one scandal, glamorizing crime would spark another. Up next, how a gangster film inspired by Al Capone almost got Hollywood shut down for good. Scarface, 1932. When Scarface hit theaters in 1932, it didn't just tell a story about gangsters. It made being a gangster look dangerously appealing. Directed by Howard Hawks and produced by the rebellious Howard Hughes, Scarface was inspired by real-life mobster Al Capone. It was violent, raw, and unapologetic. One reviewer at the time said, "It's not a warning, it's a celebration of crime." The film followed Tony Camonte, a ruthless criminal who rises to power in Chicago's underworld. Audiences were captivated by the fast cars, machine guns, and the glamorous life of crime. But government officials and moral groups weren't impressed. They feared that Scarface glorified violence and would inspire copycats in a country already struggling with Prohibition-era crime. Censors demanded that the film be shelved or heavily altered. Howard Hughes, never one to back down, fought the censors tooth and nail. After months of battles, he was forced to add a moral message condemning crime and change the ending to show Tony's downfall. Even with these edits, some cities still banned the film outright. Despite, or perhaps because of, the controversy, Scarface became a hit and paved the way for gangster films. But it also left Hollywood in hot water, with calls for tighter controls on violent content. Scarface proved that when crime looked too good on screen, Hollywood would pay the price. While Scarface was slammed for glorifying gangsters, another film took controversy in a completely different direction, focusing not on violence, but on something even more taboo for the time: sex appeal. And when Howard Hughes returned with The Outlaw, he wasn't just pushing boundaries, he was daring Hollywood to stop him. The Outlaw, 1943. In 1943, Howard Hughes once again found himself at the center of Hollywood's scandal. This time, it wasn't bullets causing trouble, it was a bra. The Outlaw, starring Jane Russell, became infamous long before anyone saw it. The reason? Hughes designed a special bra to emphasize Russell's cleavage, turning a simple Western into a full-blown censorship nightmare. As critics joked, this wasn't a film about cowboys, it was about curves. The movie's plot was secondary to its marketing. Posters and ads focused entirely on Russell's figure, sparking outrage from religious groups and moral crusaders who accused Hughes of using sex to sell cinema. The Production Code Administration refused to approve the film, citing indecency. Hughes, always the showman, leaked stories about the ban to the press, knowing that controversy would drive interest. After 2 years of battling censors, The Outlaw was released in limited theaters, only to be pulled again after protests. But Hughes's strategy worked. The scandal made the film a must-see. When it finally received wider distribution, audiences flocked to see what all the fuss was about. The Outlaw didn't just test Hollywood's limits, it exposed how censorship could be manipulated for publicity. Hughes had turned a fight with moral authorities into free advertising, and Hollywood would never forget the lesson. Sometimes, scandal sells better than any script. If The Outlaw showed how far Hollywood could push sexual boundaries, another film went even further, crossing a line that few dared to approach. Long before Hollywood accepted nudity on screen, one European film starring a young Hedy Lamarr shocked the world. Let's look at how ecstasy redefined controversy and nearly ruined a future star's career. Ecstasy, 1933. In 1933, a film from Czechoslovakia sent shockwaves across the globe. Ecstasy, starring a then unknown Hedy Lamarr, featured something no audience had seen before: full nudity and a scene suggesting female pleasure. For the time, it was unthinkable. One American newspaper declared, "This film is a threat to public decency." The story itself was simple. A young woman trapped in a loveless marriage finds passion in an affair. But it wasn't the plot that grabbed headlines. It was Lamarr's daring nude scenes, including a sequence where her character swims naked in a lake. Even more scandalous was the subtle depiction of her experiencing an orgasm, something Hollywood wouldn't dare show for decades. Ecstasy was immediately banned in the United States and several other countries. Religious leaders condemned it as immoral, while politicians called for stricter control over imported films. Though Lamarr would later become a major Hollywood star, she couldn't escape the shadow of ecstasy. The scandal followed her throughout her career, with many in Hollywood viewing her as too provocative. Ironically, while Ecstasy nearly ended Lamarr's chances in American cinema, it also made her a legend, known as the woman who challenged cinematic taboos before anyone else dared. The film stands as a reminder that sometimes it wasn't violence or crime that threatened Hollywood's image. It was the human body and the fear of showing it. From gangsters to forbidden desires, these films show just how fragile Hollywood's reputation was in its early years. But while nudity and crime caused plenty of controversy, there was another danger lurking: the fear that movies were teaching violence to a generation. And no film captured that fear more than The Public Enemy. The Public Enemy, 1931. When The Public Enemy was released in 1931, it didn't just entertain, it terrified moral authorities. Starring James Cagney as a ruthless gangster, the film pulled no punches in showing the brutal rise of organized crime. Audiences were shocked by its raw violence, especially the now iconic scene where Cagney smashes a grapefruit into a woman's face. As one critic put it, Hollywood just put crime on a pedestal. The Great Depression was already a time of hardship and unrest, and many feared that movies like The Public Enemy glorified the gangster lifestyle. Politicians and community leaders accused Hollywood of encouraging lawlessness, claiming young people would idolize criminals like Cagney's character. The film's success only made matters worse, proving that audiences were hungry for gritty, dangerous stories. Censors tried to step in, demanding cuts and warning studios that films like this were pushing society in the wrong direction. Warner Brothers responded by adding a moral disclaimer at the beginning, insisting that crime doesn't pay. But few believed it softened the message. The Public Enemy became a turning point in Hollywood's battle with censorship. It showed that realistic violence could draw huge crowds, but also spark national outrage. The controversy helped fuel stricter enforcement of content guidelines in the years to come, reminding Hollywood that too much realism could lead to real consequences. While The Public Enemy faced heat for glamorizing violence, another film found itself under fire for something more seductive. Marlene Dietrich wasn't wielding guns, she was wielding desire. And when The Blue Angel hit American shores, it wasn't just her voice that left audiences scandalized. The Blue Angel, 1930. In 1930, The Blue Angel introduced the world to Marlene Dietrich and instantly ignited controversy. Playing a seductive cabaret singer who leads a respectable professor to ruin, Dietrich's performance was bold, provocative, and unlike anything Hollywood had dared to show. As one newspaper warned, "This is not entertainment, it's temptation." Originally a German production, The Blue Angel was viewed with suspicion when it arrived in America. The film's themes of sexual power, obsession, and moral decay clashed with conservative values. Dietrich's sultry songs and revealing costumes were too much for censors, who feared the movie would corrupt audiences. In several U.S. cities, the film was either banned or heavily edited to remove the most suggestive scenes. Dietrich, meanwhile, became an overnight sensation and a symbol of forbidden allure. While some praised her as a new kind of star, others saw her as a threat to Hollywood's image. Studios quickly signed her, but kept her roles carefully controlled to avoid more backlash. The Blue Angel showed how imported films could stir controversy in ways Hollywood wasn't prepared for. It also sparked debates about gender, sexuality, and the fine line between art and indecency. Dietrich's dangerous charm reshaped how women could be portrayed on screen, but not without a fight. If Marlene Dietrich's sensuality rattled Hollywood, another actress would go even further just a few years later. Hedy Lamarr didn't just flirt with controversy, she dove headfirst into it. But before she became a star in America, her daring role in Ecstasy would make sure she could never escape Hollywood's watchful eye. Gone with the Wind, 1939. When Gone with the Wind premiered in 1939, it was hailed as a cinematic masterpiece. But beneath its sweeping romance and stunning visuals was a core of deep controversy. The film romanticized the Old South, portraying plantation life through a nostalgic, distorted lens. Critics and civil rights groups quickly pointed out its glorification of slavery and offensive racial stereotypes. One commentator wrote, "It's a love letter to a past that should never be loved." The film's use of racial slurs and its depiction of African American characters as loyal servants or comic relief sparked protests, even at the time of its release. While many praised Hattie McDaniel's performance as Mammy, her historic Oscar win was overshadowed by the fact that she wasn't allowed to sit with her co-stars at the segregated ceremony. Despite the backlash, Gone with the Wind became one of the most successful films in history, but its legacy has been haunted by ongoing debates about race, history, and Hollywood's responsibility in shaping cultural narratives. In recent years, calls to contextualize or even pull the film from streaming platforms have reignited the controversy. Gone with the Wind is proof that even the most celebrated films can carry dangerous messages, and that Hollywood's biggest successes often come with a darker side the industry would rather ignore. From violent gangsters to seductive singers and romanticized plantations, Hollywood's most iconic films often carried the weight of controversy. But while these stories sparked moral debates, another film would soon shake both faith and desire, proving that even nuns weren't safe from scandal when Black Narcissus hit the screen. Black Narcissus, 1947. In 1947, Black Narcissus stunned audiences with its breathtaking visuals. But it was the story beneath the beauty that caused an uproar. This wasn't just a tale of missionaries in a remote Himalayan convent. It was a bold exploration of repressed desire, obsession, and madness, all centered around nuns. As one religious leader said at the time, "It's a film that dares to mix holiness with temptation." The movie followed a group of nuns struggling with their inner demons as isolation and forbidden feelings take hold. Deborah Kerr's lead character battles emotional and sexual tension, something rarely, if ever, shown in films involving religious figures. The portrayal of a nun driven to jealousy and lust shocked church groups worldwide. Black Narcissus was condemned by religious organizations, banned in several countries, and criticized for disrespecting faith. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, the film received critical acclaim for its groundbreaking cinematography and psychological depth. It pushed Hollywood into dangerous territory, showing that even sacred subjects weren't off-limits. But it also forced studios to tread carefully when mixing religion with human flaws, marking Black Narcissus as both a cinematic triumph and a moral lightning rod. If Black Narcissus blurred the lines between faith and desire, Alfred Hitchcock was about to blur something else: morality itself. With Rope, Hitchcock took inspiration from a real-life murder and dared to hint at themes Hollywood refused to acknowledge, including a subject that was strictly taboo: homosexuality. Rope, 1948. Alfred Hitchcock was no stranger to suspense, but in 1948, he delivered something far more provocative with Rope. Inspired by the real-life Leopold and Loeb murder case, the film followed two young men who kill for the thrill of it, believing they're intellectually superior. But it wasn't just the cold-blooded crime that stirred controversy. Hollywood insiders and sharp-eyed viewers noticed the unspoken suggestion that the killers were also lovers. As one critic whispered, "There's more hidden in this film than just the body." At a time when any reference to homosexuality was banned under the Hays Code, Rope danced dangerously close to the edge. Hitchcock never said it outright, but the chemistry between the two leads, played by John Dahl and Farley Granger, didn't go unnoticed. Censors debated whether the film should be blocked altogether. Adding to the scandal was Hitchcock's decision to shoot the film in a series of long, continuous takes, giving Rope a sense of real-time intimacy that made audiences feel like unwilling accomplices. The combination of technical daring and subversive themes left many viewers unsettled. While Rope wasn't banned, it faced heavy criticism and limited promotion due to its underlying themes. Hitchcock had quietly challenged Hollywood's strict moral code and gotten away with it, but just barely. The film stands as an early example of how directors could subvert censorship without saying a word. While Hitchcock mastered subtle rebellion, the next film on our list took controversy head-on. With A Place in the Sun, Hollywood could no longer hide behind suggestion. It was a film about ambition, sex, class, and even hinted at abortion, topics that sent censors scrambling and nearly tore apart the studio system. A Place in the Sun, 1951. In 1951, A Place in the Sun wasn't just another Hollywood romance. It was a bold story about how far someone would go to escape poverty and chase success. Starring Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor, the film followed a young man torn between true love and a secret relationship that threatens to destroy his future. But what really made it controversial was what Hollywood tried to hide: premarital sex, unwanted pregnancy, and the dark implication of murder. As one reviewer said, "This is the American dream with blood on its hands." Shelley Winters played the vulnerable factory girl who becomes pregnant by Clift's character, a plotline that directly confronted taboos around sex outside of marriage and abortion. The production code forbade explicit mention of such topics, but A Place in the Sun wove them into its narrative with thinly veiled references, pushing boundaries without openly breaking the rules. Censors were furious, but the film's prestige and star power made it too big to ban outright. Still, religious groups and moral watchdogs criticized the film for promoting immorality and depicting a protagonist who nearly gets away with murder for personal gain. Despite the controversy, A Place in the Sun became a critical and commercial success, winning 6 Academy Awards. But behind the accolades was a film that signaled a shift. Hollywood could no longer ignore real-world issues, even if it meant risking scandal. By the early 1950s, it was clear Hollywood couldn't keep hiding from adult themes forever. But when James Dean arrived on screen, rebellion took center stage. Up next, Rebel Without a Cause would spark fear that movies weren't just reflecting society, they were leading a generation astray. Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. In 1955, Rebel Without a Cause didn't just introduce James Dean, it introduced fear. Fear that Hollywood was inspiring a generation to rebel. Dean's portrayal of Jim Stark, a misunderstood teenager clashing with parents and authority, hit too close to home for many adults. As one headline warned, this film teaches kids how to disobey. The movie showed teenage angst, violence, and defiance in a way that had never been done before. Knife fights, drag races, and scenes of young people challenging their parents left parents and politicians horrified. At a time when America was obsessed with maintaining order and family values, Rebel Without a Cause felt like a direct threat. Many blamed Hollywood for rising juvenile delinquency, pointing to this film as proof that movies were corrupting youth. Schools and church groups called for bans, and in some cities, the film was pulled from theaters after being linked to teenage violence. Despite the backlash, Rebel Without a Cause became iconic. It captured the voice of a generation that felt unseen, but it also made Hollywood a scapegoat for society's fears. Controversy cemented James Dean's status as a legend, but it left studios wary of ever-glorifying rebellion so openly again. While Rebel Without a Cause was accused of corrupting teenagers, another film took aim at corrupting language itself. The Moon is Blue didn't need violence or sex to stir outrage. It just needed one word: virgin. What followed was a censorship battle that shook Hollywood's foundation. The Moon is Blue, 1953. In 1953, The Moon is Blue became one of the most controversial films, not for what it showed, but for what it said. This romantic comedy dared to use words like virgin and pregnant, terms strictly forbidden by the Hays Code. The censors refused to give it approval, but director Otto Preminger released it anyway. As he famously declared, "The audience isn't as fragile as the censors think." Hollywood was stunned. No major studio had ever openly defied the production code. Moral groups and church leaders called for boycotts, labeling the film indecent. Some theaters refused to screen it, while others faced protests for doing so. Despite, or because of, the controversy, The Moon is Blue became a box office success. The public was curious to see what all the fuss was about, and many viewers found the film surprisingly tame. But the real impact was behind the scenes. Preminger's bold move exposed how outdated and rigid the censorship system had become. This film didn't just cause scandal. It cracked the foundation of Hollywood's control over content. The Moon is Blue marked the beginning of the end for the Hays Code, proving that audiences were ready for more honest conversations, even in comedies. If The Moon is Blue challenged censorship with words, Lolita would challenge it with one of the most disturbing stories ever brought to screen. When Stanley Kubrick adapted Nabokov's infamous novel, Hollywood was forced to face a question it never wanted to answer: how far is too far? Lolita, 1962. In 1962, Lolita pushed Hollywood into its darkest controversy yet. Based on Vladimir Nabokov's shocking novel, the film told the story of a middle-aged man's obsession with a teenage girl. Even mentioning such a plot was taboo, let alone adapting it for the big screen. As one censor said, this story should never see the light of day. Director Stanley Kubrick knew he was treading dangerous ground. To avoid a total ban, he aged up the character of Lolita and relied on suggestion rather than explicit scenes. Still, the mere subject matter outraged critics, religious groups, and moral watchdogs. Many theaters refused to show the film, and in some countries, it was outright banned. Despite, or perhaps because of, the scandal, Lolita sparked endless debate about art, morality, and censorship. Kubrick later admitted that strict Hollywood rules forced him to soften the story, but audiences still felt uneasy watching it. Lolita didn't just flirt with controversy, it redefined it. The film forced Hollywood to confront uncomfortable topics and proved that even in an era of censorship, filmmakers would find ways to challenge societal limits. These films didn't just make headlines, they made history. Each one challenged what Hollywood was allowed to show, forcing the industry to face its darkest fears, from moral outrage to political pressure. Some careers were ruined, others were made legendary. But all these movies changed cinema forever.